Mmusi Maimane has secured a second term as president of the Democratic Alliance. This was revealed during an announcement of nominations for the party's leadership just a short while ago. For reaction to this breaking news, I suppose we're joined by political analyst Lukhona Mnguni, who joins us from Durban. Lukhona, good morning to you. So, not much of a surprise that Mmusi Maimane will not be challenged when the DA goes to Congress next month.
Well, good morning, Tembegile. Yes, not much of a surprise because, I mean, also the turnover in terms of the elections within the DA is actually quite shorter. So, you know, he's had an opportunity to lead for the past 3 years, and now they are giving him another chance to lead the DA. Of course, it is also because of strategic approaches, I think, from people within who no longer have confidence in his leadership, and they are thinking, well, they can survive another 3 years with him, and then they will put up a challenge after that. I mean, of course, Mmusi is still young himself. What happens after he leaves that position of DA leader? And so all of these considerations, I think, are uppermost in people within the DA. And as you see with the announcements, there seems to be gunning for strategic positions, whether you're looking at the chair of Federal Council and other positions that are seen as important within the party, just beyond that of the leader.
But looking at the changing times politically, I mean, Maimane would now have to go up against a changing ANC, well, an ANC that at least says it's changing. The EFF, on the other hand, is also ramping up its stance. Is Maimane the best pair of hands to lead the DA?
I am not particularly convinced that Maimane has been able to lead the DA in the manner that it was promised to be, and I'll put a few things to it. Firstly, the message that he is putting across to South Africans in terms of what the DA stands for. When they were going to the last conference, I mean, they launched the Values Charter, for example, and this was seen as the DA attempting to start a path of reorienting itself and talking to issues that face South Africans, but also probably saying, is there a need for an ideological shift for the Democratic Alliance as an organization? Should the party rebrand itself? Should it present to South Africans a new vision? So when you talk to the DA, and I mean, their core economic plan still talks to the National Development Plan, for example, and it's a failed plan, we know this, and how do you then recalibrate discussions on the economy? How do you intervene in the economy in a way that actually jumpstarts our growth, jumpstarts our employment, jumpstarts shifts in terms of poverty? What is the plan? So beyond just the optics, as some people would say, you need a substantive thinking from the DA, and I think Maimane has not been able to inject or infuse the right trajectory of vision thinking within the DA, and that has been his biggest failure for me in the last 3 years. So yes, you are right, Tembegile, to say the ANC is changing. There is no longer a soft target in Jacob Zuma. Should they focus on much more substantive issues? Definitely they should, but are they? I do not think so. And do they have the prospect to actually present a vision? I'm not convinced that Maimane has done the legwork to actually say, here is a vision for South Africa. Talking about jobs is important because that's the crisis that faces the nation. But how do you realize this? And I think some of their economic planning and ideas that they've presented are outdated. Some of them are impractical, and some of them, to a large extent, do not talk to the realistic makeup of our social fabric or socio-economic fabric as South Africa.
Let's talk about the point you made about the thinking in the DA, because Mmusi Maimane in the last 3 or 4 years or so has always faced questions and people saying that as much as he is leader, he is very much not the brains of the DA. And one has to wonder just how he'll go about changing that after re-election in April.
Certainly an important point, and I think it was Lindiwe Mazibuko who made the point in one column she wrote for the Business Day a few years back now, talking about brains trust within the DA that is still white and male-dominated. It hasn't opened up space. And the problem with that brains trust issue, Tembegile, is that if you don't open it up, you then face a situation where the party cannot really talk to issues that affect the majority of the country. So you see a DA, I like the saying, you know, that they say the EFF is flip-flopping. I mean, I think the DA has also flip-flopped a number of times, especially on issues that talk to things like affirmative action, redress for past injustices, how do you conduct equitable transformation in key industries in the economy, how do you deal with the question of land. And I think the DA came as the biggest loser in that debate in Parliament, because they were seen as not walking a very stable path. They were actually fence-sitting to an extent, and where they were not fence-sitting, they were seen as siding with the position of anti-land redistribution. So yes, this question of a brains trust will continue to dominate Mmusi, and I think this is why you see some people trying to go for leadership positions so that they are in positions of power that shift the narrative within the DA. That's important. So your people like Solim Simang, whether they are transformational in a fundamental sense or not, we would have to see if they do make it to positions of leadership. But I think, yes, Mmusi Maimane needs to think long and hard. There has been some movement, though. I mean, if you look at the possibility of moving the head office of the DA from Western Cape to Gauteng, that's a key move. It seems almost aesthetic, but it's actually key in terms of where the head office is housed and who has influence over that. So yes, going forward, Mmusi must think very hard. There's been a perception around him that even in press conferences, you will see that he doesn't have the sort of Helen Zille classic press conferences where he talks alone as the leader. He's always flanked by some people that are viewed as gatekeepers, whether you look at people like Steenhuisen, you look at Self, and you look at Gordon Lewis and other people. You get a sense that there's gatekeeping in terms of who and what Mmusi should actually speak about.
James Self, you mentioned there. I'm looking at the list now. He stands uncontested for chairperson of the Federal Council. He's been in the DA leadership now, top structures, for well close to 2 decades. What is it that the DA so loves about James Self?
Well, I think they love the fact that James Self is part of the old tradition. He maintains and keeps the status quo of the DA. He's also a good gatekeeper for conservatives within the DA. And I think to an extent, if you look very closely on contentious issues, you've almost seen a parallel leadership between James Self and Mmusi Maimane. I would have thought that the first person to be contested in the DA, if people are thinking transformation of the party, would be James Self. In fact, as you say, he's been there for a very long time. And I think leadership change is important. And it's important that leadership changes from a collective perspective, not just from that of a leader. Because if you create this idea that the leader is a token leader, and there are people that still hold the power base within the DA, talking about people like James Self, and you allow that narrative to fester in society, what you are doing is that you are weakening the leader, in fact, and you are weakening the transformation agenda of the DA. And it is no wonder that the DA, in fact, people had said it would hit a ceiling, and they disproved that to an extent in 2016. But if you look at the margins of growth of the DA, they've actually quite de-accelerated. So they are not making as many inroads as they would have hoped to make, because even though they may say they've got a black leader, and we know the political reason why they have a black leader, and the political reason is that they penetrate into black constituencies. But black constituencies are saying, but we can't have a black leader that is still controlled behind the scenes by senior politicians and by senior political narratives presented by people like James Self. And I think that the DA needs to think very clearly what it seeks to achieve, and whether it is comfortable if we say it has reached a political ceiling, because not long ago a leaked report of an internal polling by the DA says they seem to have actually gone back to pre-2016 figures in terms of their popularity with the electorate. So yes, the DA is sitting with fundamental problems, but they might as well say, we are comfortable with where we are. We can keep the margins that we have within the electorate, and we'll keep our old traditions and our old personnel, and therefore at the expense of growth, at the expense of electoral support gaining, we are comfortable where we are, and therefore this is what we present to South Africa. So for me, that's how it comes across when they say they are still keeping a James Self there.
Mmusi Maimane, speaking yesterday, said that the DA is going to hold its most diverse elective Congress next month. But I'm wondering, will it be a weaker or stronger DA than the one he inherited from Helen Zille?
Well, I think to an extent it might be a weaker DA. Within the party, they've done things that compromise the organization. If you look at how they've handled the Patricia de Lille matter, it's something that has highly divided the Democratic Alliance, because there's no sense of justice, there's no sense of consistency, there's no sense of respecting party structures and processes. So I think Mmusi hasn't come across as someone who has complete control to infuse his vision to the party and drive it to a particular path. Of course, they are stronger in the sense of electoral gains. They are now having mayors in 3 metropolitan municipalities. So that is a beauty and a gain for them, something to reflect on. There are lessons to be learned in terms of how to manage coalitions. So they will be deliberating about that, with the prospect that Gauteng province might be under a coalition, for example, come 2019 elections. So yes, they have a number of successes to point to. Whether those successes are successes that they are fundamentally in charge of and they were influential in bringing about those successes is another thing. But yes, so a bag of mixed reaction there. But I think Mmusi is going into this conference with people needing certainty in how do you run the party, how do you manage the party, how do you not create a sense that they are favorites insofar as Helen Zille was treated, but people like Diane Kohler-Barnard and then now Patricia de Lille, how they've been treated. So how do you deal with these narratives within the DA that there's no place for black women, for example, which has been a big discussion point in how people like Lindiwe Mazibuko and Mbali Ntuli were treated previously. So how do you create a DA that is really transformational in how it leads itself before it actually leads in government? I think that will be a key fundamental point of discussion in the conference next month.
Lastly, before I let you go, how much longer before the DA achieves its goal of being the country's majority party?
That's a very difficult one, Tembegile. The hegemony of the ANC in South African politics is very persuasive. The hegemony of the ANC in our politics is also very difficult to untangle. And I think people at the sight of the slightest change and positivity from the ANC, they are easily drawn back. I mean, I've been quite impressed or rather very surprised at how people have seriously rejoined the ANC. If you look at social media, some people have rejoined the ANC because of the New Dawn and all of that. Not that we have seen any fundamental and substantial changes from the ANC, but at the slight sight of positivity within the ANC, people then regain strength in being part and parcel of the organization. So before the DA becomes the majority party, it will be a long time. Should they even be a majority party with the current policies and plans that they have for the country and where they focus, that's another point of conversation, because it's not just about should someone win elections, it's about what is it that they offer the country, and is that offering actually persuasive enough in terms of saying this will lead South Africa into a new path, South Africa into a new prosperity where we deal with issues of inequality, poverty, education, violence in society, and unemployment. So people have to ask those questions, the substantive questions, rather than the questions of whether is it desirable for the DA to take over at some point in time.
All right, political analyst Lukhona Mnguni, always great to speak to you on ENCA.